marches on in space. Our heroes from Star Wars are out and about doing their thing to save the day. But we find ourselves here, a lowly Imperial scout trooper who strangely has a section of the Death Star here completely to himself. So we can admire these ships outside. Yeah, I thought I noticed the lasers coming from nowhere. So there's a variety of iconic ships out there. We have the Nebulon off to the left. We have Star Destroyers. We have a destroyed MC-80A, I believe. We have some turbo laser turrets, defense turrets for the Death Star here. These turbo lasers are not agile enough to generally hit fighters, but they are effective against slower moving ships, capital ships and the like. This hangar that we are in is not fully constructed. Of course, the Empire baited the Rebel Alliance into attacking the Death Star, believing that the station was not operational, but of course it turned out to be. This is a Corellian Corvette, of course. The very first ship ever seen in Star Wars. Of course, it is a blockade runner, and we see Princess Leia aboard her Corvette, the Tantive 4, which I know I pronounce wrong. There's some weird pronunciation for it. Tantivy, I think. We have another massive hangar here. Also not quite finished. So the Death Star has some superficial elements that are unfinished, but its super laser is of course fully operational. So as we walk around, we will find that things are not completely polished. I should have, of course, called out Darth Vader's Super Star Destroyer out there, the Executor. It was the Star Destroyer that is vastly larger than the others. I always really enjoyed the design of the Executor. The large strips underneath that look appreciate the design of the Death Star. Even as alarms blare and lasers fire out in the void of space. We have these Death Star elevators here. These little cylindrical tubes. All very iconic design, originating in A New Hope, Episode 4. Well, really originating just in Star Wars. Because of course that's what it was at the time. We have a Lambda shuttle here, and that's, I've never actually noticed the rear turret there. I really like the design of Star Wars ships. I don't know, it's something about their kind of retro sci-fi chunky look. They're not usually sleek, or at least they're sleek within a certain, within a certain range. Now, the prequels are a little different on that front. They kind of set new aesthetic parameters, you might say. And so you get some very glossy, sleek looking starships in those, which I do appreciate, in their own way. But that classic original trilogy chunky ship design is really special. By the way, I did my research. I actually pulled up an Arabish, translator, a dictionary, or just the character reference. And that screen is all gibberish. Doesn't mean anything. It's just a bunch of random characters keyboard mashing, which is too bad. Would have been a fun place for an Easter egg, or at least, just make it consistent with the world. I love these, cross-shaped, cavernous structures in the Death Star. You can think of Luke, or, pardon me, not Luke, Lando Calrissian and Nine Nub flying through them, and the Death Star too. But yeah, their design is just very appealing to me. I like the kind of repeating nature of the fins, or the sheets, I suppose, in each of the corners. So these hallways are all very finished, very glossy. All of the inset lighting. So that's some sort of, power station or something, but I want to walk down here because there's something a bit more interesting to look at. Not sure what kind of robot that is. A little Roomba or something. So, this little walkway here with a safety railing shows us this super laser. I'm not sure what you would call this, a sort of tributary pipe, which is very cool. We can be risky and walk down here, although I'm sure this would kill us if it turned on while we were there. And here it goes again. Very cool looking. And the Death Star, its super laser weapon, it is charged up, or it is fed into by a bunch of mini lasers arranged in sort of a circle, and then they all fire and are focused into one massive laser, which then of course, can blow up Alderaan. This is a cool looking room with this blue haze coming up. And walking through those tributary pipelines reminds me of Star Wars The Force Unleashed, which is a wonderful game. And in the finale of that game, spoilers, you are running through the Death Star, and there's a section where you are running through these, those laser channeling pipelines. So there's an environmental element there where the laser will periodically appear and kill anybody in its path, so you can, throw enemies into it and whatnot. And, that gets me thinking, the main character in The Force Unleashed is Starkiller. And Starkiller is played by Sam Witwer. And Sam Witwer voices Darth Maul in the, Clone Wars, Rebels era of Star Wars. And that is quite relevant right now because a new Star Wars show was just announced. I just watched the trailer a couple days ago. And now I can't recall the name. Star Wars, it's called Maul. What's it called? Maul Shadow Lord. Something like that. And, of course, Sam Witwer returning to play Maul. say, the trailer looked crazy cool. Here we have a massive drop-off, this huge cavernous chamber with these sort of power channeling structures. Of course, Obi-Wan deactivates some of them to turn off the tractor beam. So I don't know exactly what they are. I think they're, probably energy pipelines, power pipelines, conduits that, can be flipped at will, like breakers. That's a very cool sight here. This huge, narrow shaft continuing on and curving out of sight. So, Maul looks really cool. If you have listened to a bunch of my Star Wars talk, I've yapped about Star Wars a lot on this channel, primarily by playing through LEGO Star Wars, the complete saga, in which I yapped about my thoughts on Star Wars extensively, and particularly my thoughts on sort of modern era of Star Wars. And to make a long story short, I have pretty negative opinions on modern Star Wars. By the way, down that hall, which is restricted to us right now, we can see a crashed CR-90 Corvette, the Corellian Corvette. In this map, I forget the name of the mode, but there's a mode where the story is basically the rebels crash their Corvette into the Death Star, and then they have to, fight over a series of objectives to secure their escape. So I wish I could show you that, but this Supremacy game mode has blocked it off. So I won't go through, all of the Star Wars projects and my specific thoughts on each of them, but suffice it to say that with a couple exceptions, shoutouts to Andor, which is like the best Star Wars media ever created. Here's another view into the hangar, where we would be fighting our way from if we were the rebels. But of course, I am not a rebel scum. I am a scout trooper, a loyal servant of the Emperor. So anyway, I kind of swore off of Star Wars. That's putting it too strongly. What I did was, for a long time, I made it a point to watch every new Star Wars show and movie. I loved Star Wars, and I just wanted to keep up with it, you know. But at a certain point, they finally broke me after The Mandalorian season 3, and I said, you know what, I'm not gonna watch Star Wars stuff anymore unless there's a very specific, compelling reason for me to do so. For example, I hear, you know, oh, it's actually incredible. Well, Dave Filoni, you're pulling me back in, baby. That Maul trailer was so cool. Now, here's the thing. I think the show could still be bad. Because if the writing is bad, if the characters are bad, and so on, you know, if the plot is bad, it can be bad. We're in this TIE fighter hangar here. Some of the TIEs are not fully assembled. But the trailer definitely showed that the show is firing on all cylinders when it comes to its animation, its, you know, composition, its shot composition, its cinematography, and fight choreography. I love this angle we have here. We can see some of the constructed girders and stuff. There's a Corvette out there, a pair of them actually. A Star Destroyer way off in the distance. But I like this 90-degree angle here where we can see these, like turret portholes, I think those are. But yeah, the show, first of all, just looked gorgeous, beautiful. You know, when the Clone Wars movie came out way back in the day, and I was a kid back then, but I looked at it and I thought it was one of the ugliest things I'd ever seen. I thought that animation style was so weird and unnerving and ugly. And I mean, it kind of was. But it was also, you know, just a new style. We have some sort of defense cannon here. Not sure if this is probably a turbo laser cannon of some kind. But the Clone Wars animation style, it took a long time. Even when I was watching the Clone Wars show, it took a very, very long time. I really always thought it was quite ugly. But over time, they refined their abilities. They got better at working within that animation style. And honestly, like, they have made it gorgeous now. The Bad Batch sequences where they're doing some very visually impressive stuff are just absolutely beautiful, and these sequences from the Maul trailer are phenomenally gorgeous. the show is going to be good or not. I can't say that. I know that Maul is typically, when I think about the Clone Wars and Rebels, it doesn't always work. Those shows, I think, are very hit and miss. I grew up with the Clone Wars, I'm as much of a biased observer as anybody. I loved that show as a kid. I would watch it with my best friend Sean, and then we would go outside and we would play, and he would be Anakin and I would be Obi-Wan. Every day on the school playground, I'd be Obi-Wan, he'd be Anakin. And we'd be running around in the Clone Wars. Not sure exactly what this structure is here. Of course, there's a control point that we could capture. Some sort of central area where all of this pipe is meeting. Maybe I don't know, a cooling area or something. So anyway, that being said, I think the Clone Wars has some real problems. It's got some great stuff, and it has a lot of dead air, which is fine. But my point is that the Maul stuff, I think, was generally quite good in Clone Wars and Rebels. Whenever Maul shows up, it's usually a pretty good episode. It's usually a pretty good episode. Here we have an X-Wing that is crashed, Test crashed X-Wing. Crashed X-Wing has got the I don't see anybody in there. Hopefully the rebel pilot made it out and was able to, these go down fighting. Or, sorry, I don't mean that. Rebel scum. That's what I meant to say. Rebel scum. We have some more of these cannons here. Sort of a storage area, I suppose. So, all of that is to say, not that reading the tea leaves is really a worthwhile use of time, but I think they generally do Darth Maul pretty well. So, based on the trailer, and the fact that it's Darth Maul centered, I have some hope, to be honest, for this show, which I try not to have hope for Star Wars nowadays, so, I'm opening my heart up to be disappointed. But I will definitely be checking out Maul. We have a view here into those massive hangars that we were in earlier. We can also look out along the edge of the Death Star here. The big hangar bay entrance there with the force field. that's just spraying into my mind that made me think of, in the original Star Wars Battlefront 2, the space battles. It's a nice room. It's kind of peaceful, if not for the alarms, I guess. Anyway, in the original Star Wars Battlefront 2, you had the space battles where two capital ships were side by side, and you would spawn in your team's capital ship. You would run into the hangar and get in a starfighter and fly outside. It was an incredible game mode. So fun. It breaks my heart that we've never tried something like that again, you know? It was amazing. A little underfeatured, perhaps, in going back to it today, but that's fine for the time, you know? It should have been the foundation for a lot of growth and experimentation and development, but anyway, we don't need to go into the whole tragedy of Battlefront 3. This is a cool room. This is like barracks and stormtrooper barracks, so we have all these armor racks, and then I like this little bed here. Some stormtrooper didn't like living in his little pod, I guess. He needed some more room to spread out. It's that very comfortable, standard issue bedroll. Very nice. All of those little extended pods, by the way, are sleeping pods. See if you can get a look at one of the beds there. Yeah, you can kind of see the bedroll there. So, anyway, that space battle. If you got in a ship, you could fly out of the force field. But otherwise, the force field was, a solid wall. You couldn't cross through it as a person. But what you could do is you could fly up, you could lift off, and then land, and then lift off, and then land very fast, moving forward a tiny bit each time, and then wiggle your starfighter's cockpit out of the force field. And then you could get outside of the force field by hopping out. We have some repair parts kind of scattered around here. So, once you are outside of the ship, or outside of the force field, you could then kind of walk around on the rim of your capital ship. Now, there wasn't really anything to do out there. You were kind of stuck. But I think it was the Star Destroyer. You could drop down onto that lower lip that kind of sticks out, and you could walk really far up and down the length of the ship. Anyway, that's, just a random memory that came to me looking at these hangar doors. There's the executor out there, looking big and beautiful. So this hangar has a lower level. We can walk down and see what's under here. Lots of pipes, grating, railings, tubes, and more of that sort of industrial look. The Death Star has some very polished areas and some more industrial looking areas. This is cool. We can see the underside of the lift. Let's go up top and we can see what's on it, which we already know, of course. We've been here before, but the shuttle is resting on the lift here. So presumably this lift goes down into sort of ship storage area, I would imagine, so that you can bring it down, put it into storage, and bring some other ship out. This hallway is very sparky. I think we will leave that one alone. So, we have kind of wandered in a circle around this map and find ourselves back in this massive hangar. I like the unfinished nature of the Death Star too. I like seeing all of those red girders that are behind this, gleaming, polished floor, and the sleek white walls with their inset lighting. Of course, that's the symbol of the Galactic Empire. I didn't actually look this Aurebesh up. I kind of assumed that because the other one was gibberish, that probably was as well. But if you check it out, you can let me know if I missed out on something. So let's walk back to the hangar door where we started. I want to look down into the depths of the construction area, see what we can see. It's cool getting this peek behind the surface, cure somebody's epilepsy. Alright. I suppose that brings us to the end of our exploration of the Death Star 2. So, as we look out on the battle over Endor, or rather the forest moon of Endor, I hope you will join me in offering our well wishes to our brave Imperial boys who are fighting off those rebel terrorists. And until next time, my friends, thank you for joining me. Please take care of yourselves.